7. The family and authority. The Romans conquered Judea, but later, when Christianity conquered Rome, the Romans said of this biblical faith of Hebrew origins, Victi victoribus leges dederant. The conquered gave their laws to the conquerors. The law of the later Roman Empire and of the Christian West has been largely altered by biblical law, and fundamental to this change is the alteration of family law. The basic Christian legal reform was instituted by Justinian and his Empress Theodora in the 6th century. Zimmerman has summarized the basic Christian reforms with respect to sex in the family. First, only heterosex relations in marriage were made publicly allowable. All sexual relations other than normal marital relations were now illegal and sinful. Second, this classification of all other forms of sexuality as objectionable was applied to every social class without distinction. The family became the normal and legal way of life for all. The preface to this part of the Novellae Code stated, Previous legislation has dealt with aspects of these matters piecemeal. Now we seek to put them all together and give the people certain clear rules of conduct so as to make the family de nuptiis, the standard form of life for all human beings for all time and everywhere. The purpose of this is to guarantee artificial immortality to the human species. This is the Christian way of life. Third, prohibited sex activities were made punishable by law, especially forms of commercialized sex. Fourth, and Zimmerman notes, fundamental, contracts involving non-family sex activities as repayment for support or gifts were made illegal. All parties in such a contract became accessories to an illegal act. Among other things, concubinage lost its legal status. Fifth, these legal steps were part of a wider movement to make the family the defined public way of life and status. The result of this legislation was the redirection of civilization. It was the creation of a family system which would fit best into planned greatness. The authors never considered a perfect man. They sought to enroll the average man in a social system which could reach some great civilized world unity. The effects of this legislation were extensive. Two important areas of change were inheritance and property. Inheritance laws were now governed by family considerations, with the legitimate wife and her children having a status not given to a concubine or mistress and her children. The limitation of inheritance to the legitimate family made the family the significant agent and power with respect to property. The family was now far more than the basic social unit. It was, in essence, the social system. It was the social system, however, without the stultifying and immoral powers of the family system of ancestor worship. In ancestor worship, the family is geared to the past and hostile to the future. In the Christian family system, the Mosaic law as interpreted in terms of the New Testament rulings concerning the family, the perspective is on the Christian future, on the kingdom of God, and its requirements for today and tomorrow. Without the authority of the family, a society quickly moves into social anarchy. The source of the family's authority is God. The immediate locale of the authority is the father or husband, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 1 to 15. The abdication by the father of his authority, or the denial of his authority, leads to the social anarchy described by Isaiah chapter 3, verse 12. Women rule over men. Children then gain undue freedom and power and become oppressors of their parents. The emasculated rulers in such a social order lead the people astray and destroy the fabric of society. The end result is social collapse and captivity. Isaiah chapter 3, verses 16 to 26. And a situation of danger and ruin for women, a time of reproach or disgrace, in which the once independent and feministic women are humbled in their pride and seek the protection and safety of a man. Indeed, 7 women, Isaiah said, seek amidst the ruins after one man, each begging for marriage and ready to support themselves if only the disgrace and shame which overwhelm the lone and defenseless woman be taken away from them. Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1. Isaiah clearly saw the absence of the man's authority as productive of social chaos. The man as the head of the family is the necessary principle of order and also the principle in order. Dominion is God's principle for man over nature. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. And for the male in the person of the husband and father in the family. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 1 to 15. Dominion, as the male's nature and prerogative, is to be found throughout the animal world as a part of God's creation ordinance. In animals, as Ardrey has pointed out, there is a primacy of dominion over sexual and other drives. The time will come when the male will lose all interest in sex, but he will still fight for his status. In fact, dominance in social animals is a universal instinct independent of sex. This male instinct for dominion reveals itself in animals in 3 ways. First, in territoriality, that is, a property instinct and drive, and second, in status, a drive to establish dominion in terms of rank in a rigidly hierarchical order, and third, survival, and order as a means of survival. This is true of animals in a natural setting. Zoo animals, being in a welfare society, are more absorbed with sex. In the male, dominion leads to increased sexual potency and longevity. Moreover, it is a curious characteristic of the instincts of order that most are masculine. The female's sexual and maternal instincts are personal, and thus, in a sense, anarchistic. These characteristics are true of human life also. The woman becomes absorbed with problems of law and order in a personal way, that is, when her family and her family's safety is endangered by its decay. The man will be concerned with problems of society apart from a condition of crisis. The woman becomes concerned when social decay has personal implications, and her concern then is a major one. Male and female need each other, and godly order means marriage, the union of man and woman under God, and to His glory and service. Apart from one another, or in contempt or at odds with one another, the emphasis of man and woman tends to become one-sided. Perhaps as telling an example of this as any, extreme almost to the point of caricature, is that of Henry VIII of England and Queen Catherine. Catherine, more than Sir Thomas More, deserved to become the Catholic saint of her day. More was first and last a humanist. Catherine was a godly woman of intense faith and courage. The daughter of the great Queen Isabella of Spain, she shared with her sister, wrongly called Joanna the Mad, an almost incredible absorption with a purely personal aspect of issues. As a result, her depraved father, Ferdinand, whom Catherine loved blindly, was able to use Catherine as a pawn for Spanish power, almost to the destruction of England. Ferdinand had killed Juana's husband and usurped Juana's throne, and he had no scruples about taking advantage of any relative. Catherine was equally blind in dealing with her husband Henry, where more than personal issues were involved. Henry VIII, on the other hand, cannot be viewed in purely personal and feminine terms, as one concerned basically with his lusts. Certainly, Henry was a sinner here, but his basic motive was the desire to preserve the kingdom from anarchy by gaining a male heir. Prior to his father's ascension to the throne, England had been long rent and wasted by a bloody and intermittent war of succession. Henry's basic concern was to preserve order by means of an assured and strong dynastic succession, which meant to him a male heir. This was to Henry the fundamental moral consideration, even as the personal relationship was the fundamental moral consideration to Catherine. Henry read all events in terms of his principle, and justified every step in terms of it. A talented and intelligent man, he was also immature and self-righteous. But he was not alone in considering England's situation and his own in terms of the impersonal issues of order and succession. Both Luther and Melanchthon were ready to see the answer to Henry's plight in illegal bigamy, and Pope Clement VII made a like suggestion. Attempts are made to excuse both with little merit to the attempts, whatever their reasons. These religious leaders made the suggestion. All, as men, were concerned with the political scene and the problem of England's order, as against the purely personal problem of law and order between Catherine and Henry. This episode, in sharpness and extreme form, reveals the varying natures of man and woman. But the men involved in this sorry event were at least concerned with some kind of order, even if immorally so at times. Today, men, having abdicated extensively their masculinity, are less concerned with order and more with gratification. As a result, women, because their security and that of their children is at stake, become involved with the problem of social decay and law and order. Social and political action thus becomes a pressing feminine concern. Their concern underscores the decay of society and the failure of men. Where women are concerned about their defense, it means normally that either a fearful outside invader is threatening the society, or else, within the social order, men are ceasing to function as men. Matriarchal power then develops as a substitute for a normal law order. The matriarchal society is thus the decadent or broken society. The strongly matriarchal character of Negro life is due to the moral failure of Negro men, their failure to be responsible, to support the family, or to provide authority. The same is true of American Indian tribes, which are also matriarchal today. In such societies, women provide a considerable portion of the family income because the moral dereliction of the men makes it necessary. A strongly permissive element predominates in child training, and the moral failure of the male is transmitted to the next generation. The same trend towards a matriarchal society is in evidence in Western culture today. It should be stressed that, contrary to popular opinion, a matriarchal society is not a society in which women rule, but rather a society in which men fail to exercise their dominion, so that women are faced with a double responsibility. They must do their own work, and then work to stave off the anarchy created by man's moral failure. In a matriarchal society, women are burdened, not promoted. They are penalized, not rewarded. The principles of Christian family order were outlined in 1840 by Matthew Sorin. The duties arising out of the marriage relation. 1. Mutual affection. According to the order and constitution of the divine government, man is appointed to rule in the affairs of this life. It is his prerogative to hold the reins of domestic government and to direct the family interest, so as to bring them to a happy and honourable termination. This appointment of God is initiated in the order of the creation, and its propriety is manifested in the order of the fall. But still, as it is the right of the husband to rule, so it is his duty to rule with moderation and love, to love his wife, even as Christ loved the church. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. And so also, the obedience of the wife is not to be the reluctant offering of an ungracious spirit, but the cheerful service of a delighted mind. That if any obey not the word, they also may, without the word, be won by the conversation of the wives. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. 2. Mutual confidence. Nothing is or can be of more importance than this, in maintaining, in active and energetic exercise, conjugal affection. To destroy confidence is to remove the foundation of all that is excellent or valuable in the family circle. 3. Mutual attention and respect. Not the empty round of ceremonious attentions that are ostentatiously crowded into the family circle, on certain occasions seemingly more to please beholders than to express the genuine sentiments of the soul. We speak of that simple, artless, and unpremeditated respect and attention which genuine love inspires. 4. Mutual assistance. The first woman was given to man, not to live upon his labour, nor yet to labour for his living. She was designed to be one with himself, an equal sharer in his sorrows and joys. She was to be a helpmeet for him. There is a threefold assistance that married persons owe to each other, in giving interest and enjoyment to the family circle. 1. There is an assistance in promoting the temporal interests of the family. 2. Again, there is a mutual assistance in the maintenance of order, in the education and government of children. The rights of parents in their children are equal. If those children are honourable and prosperous in the world, it is the happiness of both. If they are prodigal and vicious, it is not more the misfortune of the one than of the other. It is, therefore, a self-evident duty, and one most solemnly binding on parents, to contribute their united skill, influence, and authority to train up their children in the way they should go. 3. There is also mutual assistance in promoting each other's spiritual welfare. In addition to these general views, we may here, with propriety, notice some other special duties, which are mutually due between man and wife. Thus, it is required of woman to show a spirit of subordination and to obey her husband. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. But it is also required of the husband that he love and protect his wife, that he cultivate for her the most tender affection, that he protect her according to his power, in person, health, property, and reputation. Everything pertaining to her comfort should be granted, as far as in his power, with a ready and cheerful mind. He is to love his wife as Christ loved the church. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. As it is required of the wife that she reverence her husband, not as a superior being, but as her superior in the domestic economy, and that, therefore, she should not usurp authority over the man, because Adam was first formed, then Eve. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 and 14. So it is also binding on the husband not to render himself ridiculous and contemptible in the eyes of his wife by any indecencies of speech or vile and trifling associations. He is to maintain his place, not so much by physical power or brute force, as by the excellency of his example, and those developments of mental and moral superiority and greater tact in the management of affairs which is reasonable to expect from his relation, and which will, in most cases, ensure a ready and cheerful submission to rule. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 7. Again, as it is the duty of the woman to be keeper at home, and not to be wandering from her place, like an unhappy spirit seeking rest and finding none, Titus chapter 2, verse 5, so most unquestionably, it is the duty of the husband to render that home as interesting and cheerful as possible. Soren's statements are cited not because they are remarkable or unusually good in interpreting Scripture, but because they reflect the faith and practice of Christian America in the 1840s. As Bode noted, the book is valuable not only because it gives characteristic advice, but also because it describes American home life at the middle-class level. Soren was foreign-born and so observes us more closely, takes us less for granted than would a native of our country. He apologizes for the inadequacies of the book, saying that it might better have been written by one specially adapted to the principles and habits of society in this country. But he is too modest. His objectivity is buttressed by considerable insight. It is precisely the family order described by Soren against which much revolutionary activity is directed. Permissiveness strikes directly at parental authority, and in both home and school is a revolutionary concept. The prevalence of permissiveness prevents the growth of self-discipline. Lack of self-discipline is seen by many as the reason for present juvenile delinquency. This delinquency stems from a lack of self-discipline and a degree of selfishness which is unbelievable to adults, who themselves respect the rights of others and think of them before acting. Blaine adds, self-discipline does not grow like topsy, but is the result of a two-stage building process in which parents are the prime movers. Church, school, peers, and heroes play a part too, but it is at home that the cornerstone is laid. The lack of self-discipline leads to self-importance. Having no authoritative criterion of judgment other than the self, permissively reared youth have no valid criterion of self-assessment. In other eras, teenagers have been adults, and men of 20 and 30 have been men of affairs. The youthfulness of the men in the U.S. Constitutional Convention is evidence of the early maturity and the early capacity for disciplined action and progress of men in that era. But this maturity went hand in hand with responsibility and independence, self-support and self-discipline. It was a natural and unified whole. Permissive youth demands, "Listen to us," and claims maturity in terms of physical growth without any attendant maturity of mind and action. The result is self-importance based on the humanistic standard of being a human, a person. This radical inner immaturity leads to juvenile delinquency, adult criminality, a higher rate of divorce and illegitimacy. As already indicated, this self-importance of man as man destroys all standards save that of humanity. Thus, when youthful students visited the Soviet Union, they failed to see the essential nature of that order because they had no criterion of judgment save humanism. They concluded, "People are people, no matter which side of the Iron Curtain they call home." That at least seems to be the discovery made by a group of 16 Valley students and their teacher leaders after returning from a 6-week study tour of the Soviet Union. This, quote, discovery, end quote, could have been made without a journey to the Soviet Union. But when the only standard is man, then when others are found to be men also, fellow members of humanity, coexistence is a moral necessity. There is no thought of the moral character of men because no law beyond man is recognized. Thus, an important issue of liberation strikes out against all illegitimate authority, that is, any concept of transcendental law. Quite rightly, the writers see as the enemy any concept of law which has God lurking behind it. The immoral, for them, is the dehumanizing, any and everything which limits man. Since every man is his own sovereign and law under this humanistic concept, Paul Goodman raises the question, perhaps sovereignty and law, in any American sense, are outmoded concepts. This anarchism has gone so far that a U.S. military court has ruled that conscientious objection is a valid defense to a charge of being absent without leave. The case involved a fueler of jet planes who was absent without leave for 41 days from its post. This anarchism is a trait of old and young alike. The young are simply carrying the anarchism of their day a step further. A ludicrous example of the anarchism of the parents is the case of a woman separated from her husband for 6 years who still wanted to celebrate the 25th wedding anniversary with a large party. This anarchism erodes the family and its authority in every age. It reduces the father to a non-entity, and it gives to the mother an impossible burden, that of being the family to the children. The extent to which this legal disappearance and personal abdication of the father has gone is readily illustrated. Whereas the father, as the source of authority, once normally gains custody of the children in a divorce, today only 6 states, Alaska, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Texas, continued to declare the father the preferred natural guardian. Even more revealing is the Israeli law, which denies Jewish nationality to any Jew whose mother was not Jewish, because children are in this law classified in terms of their mother, not their father. All this is erosion, and it is very real. But Also present is a legal assault. From within the church comes a demand for a genuine pluralism of sexual behaviour, which we are told will certainly occur in two main areas. First, there will be the dissolving of the concept that sex and marriage are inextricably and exclusively linked to each other. Second, there will be the gradual social acceptance, if not legalization, of bigamy or polygamy and polyandry. In the next decade or two, such bigamy is most likely to resemble the older pattern of single aunts living with a family. Social acceptance of such common law bigamy may well be the only way to initiate the required changes. Psychologists concerned with the mental health of older persons have recommended legalization of bigamy for persons over 60. The Church, of course, is silent so far. It has no real plans for the aged, nor for the involuntarily single. Let us hope that it will not wait too long before it even considers the merits of polygamy and polyandry in meeting the needs of millions of persons for whom it has no other hope to offer. But this is mild compared to the opinion of a Swedish doctor who wants not only equal legal rights, but special legal subsidies for those who practice incest, exhibitionism, pedophilia, salaromania, algolagnia, homosexuality, scopophilia, and other sexual deviations. Ullerstam's system is hostile to Christian law order and would savagely penalise the Christian marital law order. Apart from these theoretical proposals, the legal steps are serious enough. In country after country, there are moves to legalise homosexual unions. The laws against homosexuality have been extensively dropped so that a tacit legality exists. Other perversions are similarly allowed to go unprosecuted. The legal safeguards of the family are increasingly removed so that again society is threatened with the anarchy of an anti-familistic state and its legalised lawlessness. In the name of equal rights, women are being stripped of the protection of the family and given no place except the perverse competition of a sexual market in which increasingly shock, perversion, deviation, and aggressiveness command a premium. The women who gain by equal rights are those clearly who are hostile to Christian law. The law, it must be remembered, is warfare against that which is defined as evil and the protection of that which is held to be good. In the developing law structure of humanism, warfare is implicitly waged against the parents and the family as evil, and protection is extended to perverts and lawbreakers on the assumption that their, quote, rights, end quote, need protecting